Kitco News, special coverage of the Decentral Miami Conference, is brought to you by Cook Finance, a revolution in DeFi asset management.
We're here now talking about venture capitalism in the DeFi space. Aly Madhavji is part of the Blockchain Founders Fund, and he's here to talk about NFTs, DeFi, and the hottest projects to watch for. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I spoke to you last month in Dubai, and here we are in Miami. Fate brings us together once again, my friend. Listen, let's talk about NFT first. NFTs is a big theme of this conference. A lot of people don't understand valuations in NFTs, why they're paying $2 million for a JPEG of a pet rock. Walk us through the hype. What's going on?
Yeah, this has been really interesting because I think there's a lot of factors to break down here. I'll try to touch on some key ones, but you're seeing a big part of it is the community, right? So a lot of people are trying to create a sense of belonging, a part of a community. So that's where you see like, crypto punks and you see like Bored Apes. I think when you talk about then utility, some of the interesting things you're seeing is Bored Apes are actually starting to create events around the world, right? So there's now like Bored Ape parties and events that are happening, and so it's bringing people together, and it's a way of creating utility for these NFTs. Now a lot of communities or a lot of NFTs don't have this, and so there's a lot of hype, but there's also a very quick way for them to fall. If you look at the liquidity on a lot of these NFTs, it's also, in some cases, quite light. You might have some NFTs that have a $100,000 or $200,000 price floor that haven't actually had a transaction in weeks. That's a big problem, right? So it is something to be wary of, but I think if you do your research into NFTs, there's a lot of really exciting ones. So where we like to focus is looking at areas where there's utility. So if you take like gaming NFTs, you can use those NFTs in the game. You can rent them out so you can earn income from them. There's a very interesting use case. If your existing NFT can be used in other ways, so can that NFT go and be part of other games? Can it be your character as you play a game? That might be really interesting for other people to then want to play that game or interact with that. So can you start creating ways where that NFT can generate income streams, and then you can start using maybe some other methods to start justifying the valuation of some of these NFTs. There's a lot to unpack. I didn't touch on all of it, but I gave you an idea of some of the things we're thinking about.
I spoke to somebody earlier, and he said to me that during the next crypto crash, and there will be another one because they come in cycles, NFTs will be wiped out first because they have no utility, and so people are going to be dumping things that are hyped up the most. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there is some rationale to that, right? Like I would not say these aren't necessarily quite risky. I think a lot of crypto is, right? Like you can make the same statement for altcoins as well, right? And there's a lot of altcoins that are launching that are going to have the same fate. I think the big thing is, can they start creating utility and communities around them? And I think there is an opportunity. I think, like for example, we've got a company that they're a no-code gaming platform, and they built over 1,000 games in beta mode, right? And so our goal with Grid is to be able to connect any NFT and launch a game within 5 minutes. So you could connect your Bored Ape and now use that Bored Ape as a character in a game that you create. But now your fans or your friends can also now play that. And there'll be entire revenue streams built off of this. So that's not a perfect solution, but I think it's a big part of the solution. As you start getting more and more immersive ways to create utility on these NFTs, I think you create an opportunity to prevent that very significant crash that you might see if there isn't any utility to those NFTs.
Well, tell us about some of the utility that can be applied for NFTs.
Yeah, so I just mentioned one where it can be used in gaming, right? So there's different ways now that can happen. That can happen in new games as you add the character in. There's a lot of partnerships that can be made with a lot of existing games, right? Which could be really interesting. Imagine being able to use your Bored Ape in like Fortnite. That could be really cool, right? Obviously a very difficult partnership to make, but there's potential, right? You could look at even like the ability to rent. So if it's in a game, for example, then you have like rental markets. Or if there's a reason why someone would want to rent your NFT, now you can have entire rental markets from the NFT. Now you can create an income stream. That gets pretty interesting because as long as you can have some sort of income stream, you can start using some more traditional ways to value an asset, right? So that becomes quite interesting. So if you start looking at some of these, I think it actually is very interesting. There's a lot of people trying to get a lot of publicity around their NFTs. That also helps. I think it's different. It's a different way to solve the problem. I don't think it's a perfect way, but I think you're creating a lot of demand for a specific NFT, which obviously helps create a price floor.
Now, tell me about the GameFi model. We talked about this a bit, you and I, in Dubai. The concept of earning money while you're playing a video game. Just generally, how does that work?
Yeah, so this is where I think it's changing everything, right? Like, we're looking at play to earn being the next sort of big thing in gaming. We think it's going to be as big as free to play was, and how free to play essentially changed the entire pay to play sort of model in gaming. Now, actually on Splinterlands, one of our portfolio companies, there was an article that came out about a couple of weeks ago on NASDAQ and on Motley Fool. Someone started with $10 in the game, and their assets are now worth $17,000. And so how that happened is they signed up to the game, they paid $10 to start, which is the buy-in on Splinterlands. Then as you play every match, you actually earn crypto.
Yeah.
Now with that crypto, you can actually go rent better cards. As you rent better cards, you can move up higher in the game. Every day when you play, you actually earn like loot or treasure chests. And so as you earn loot, you can win free NFTs. And so as you play more and more, and every season as well, so every 15 days there's a season, you earn additional cards. And so as you play more and more, you might actually get cards that are worth like $100, $500. So like I've gotten cards that are worth thousands of dollars just given, as part of playing the game. And that's because there's so much demand for that card because people want to play the game, people like that card, but there might only be 1,000 of that card and there's 1 million players. So there's only 1,000 cards in the world, other people are gonna want that card, and so you then can sell it, and there's pretty healthy liquidity on some of these.
Okay, well, you're a venture capitalist. Why did you choose this sector in particular, the GameFi sector, to invest in?
So we invest all across the industry, but gaming in particular, I think it's one of those generational trends where we think play to earn is just going to disrupt the entire existing gaming model. So when you look at traditional games right now, essentially if you want to buy a sword or a potion or a car or anything in game, you're basically renting it from the company. Like even though you're buying the item in the game, you don't own it. Now in blockchain-based games, you actually own the asset. And that makes a very big difference because economics can be shared between what the company would have made now can be shared with the player because the player now owns that asset and the player can go sell that asset or rent that asset out. And so it changes the entire dynamics. People are also willing to spend more in these games because they own the asset. And I think that makes a very big difference.
I understand. All right, well, let's talk about valuations because that's a concern for a lot of people right now. NFTs, overvalued or undervalued?
So I think it depends. I think there is definitely a lot that's overvalued, but there's a lot of hidden gems. So if you can find NFTs that have utility, like those are very interesting, or they have plans to have utility, because that's gonna change everything, right? Because now there's demand to buy it that's gonna be there even if the market starts to crash. Like if it's in a game, there's people still gonna be playing the game.
Crypto markets at large, overvalued or undervalued?
I think in a similar way, I think it depends what you're looking at, right? So definitely parts are overvalued. I mean, there's literally right now, there's games, there's protocols out there that have very little users that have billions of dollars like in valuation. Like those are not sustainable long run, right? Because some of these companies are like pre-revenue, pre-launch, pre-product launch, and will have a multi-billion-dollar valuation. Like, is that sustainable in the long run? Most likely it's not, right? But then there's a lot of incredible, again, gems where there's companies that are, and you can see all this data on chain, that have very high daily active users, that have a lot of transactions happening on chain that are legitimate, right? That are having more and more projects consistently build on them. Like these things are actually critical, and those are things to look out for when you start thinking about long-term success of these chains.
It is a common theme of this conference, and actually of other people I've talked to, which is to pick projects that have utility. those are the ones that will likely survive a crash and likely be adopted more by the masses. Can you name one or two examples of such projects that you think are under the radar but do have quite a bit of utility?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned Splinterlands earlier. We're very bullish on Splinterlands. I mean, they've now got 350,000 daily active users, so they're bigger than most players in the industry. Lunar Crush is another one that we're really bullish on. So Lunar Crush is one of the top sentiment analysis tools in the world. We analyze about 4 million social media messages a day with natural language processing. So their token we're very bullish on because we see a lot of users using it. Most people in the crypto space that are trying to find new coins to invest in or look at, they're using this tool or a similar tool to determine that, right? So those are two in particular that we really like. We've got a lot of really cool companies though. Like we've got companies doing, decentralized derivative multi-chain exchanges, right? We've got companies all through the gaming sector. We've got companies doing launching view to earn for content instead of similar to play to earn, but where you view content, so a different type of entertainment, where you view TV and film, and you actually can earn from doing that, right? So really, really interesting things that we're working on launching as part of this as
Interesting.
well.
All right. This is a question a friend of mine asked me. He worked in traditional finance before, and he said, David, how do people in cryptos value cryptos? Projects, for example, that don't generate any cash flow, you can't DCF it. How do you place a valuation metric?
Yeah, so I think there's three probably main things to really be thinking about, right? So the first in crypto, which a lot of people may like, may not like, is sentiment. So sentiment around a project is actually quite critical.
Right.
So this is where you can use tools like Lunar Crush, which is the best data set in the industry, and it's free. You go use that and figure out what is actually getting more traction now based on against other projects, but they also have rankings against the project itself. So how is it performing against itself historically, which is very interesting to be aware of. The second thing I think to look at is users. Are people using it? Are they making transactions on chain? What does that actually look like? And this is all trackable if it's actually set up properly as a decentralized app. So if you're not tracking real users, that's a big problem, right? So in reality, we think this is very critical. The third thing, I think you can look at it as in comparables, which you would typically do in the traditional finance world. Try to compare it to other people in the industry. Where do you think it sort of is, in reality versus other competitors, versus other projects? Do you think it's overvalued or undervalued? Just using sort of a little bit more of a simple sort of test at just looking at it and trying to see based on comparables.
All right, Ali, thank you so much for coming to the show. Pleasure to speak to you as always.
Thanks so much.
And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin.
Kitco News, special coverage of the Decentral Miami Conference, is brought to you by Cook Finance, a revolution in DeFi asset management.